Hello, welcome back to the Double Swing. It's been a very chaotic sort of few days because we're recording this quite in advance due to Yumi's busy hotshot lifestyle, and Bucharest is still ongoing, so we can't do a full recap. What we can say is that so far, so terrible for, well, our guest, Ted, who made some off-meta picks and has been rewarded with one playoff appearance by one favourite and nothing else. Yumi about to go 4-4, we assume if Mongolz manage to get that win. They don't. Well, I'm smiling all of a sudden, and the season's back on after a very disastrous start. Let's just put it that way. But joining us is Elfishguy. You may know him from Geographically Challenged, and, well, I'm going to be honest, I didn't know you until that show blew up about a year ago. Like, I'd heard about you, like, you know, really? Here and there, and then that show started blowing up, and I saw an episode suggested, and I was like, hang on, this show, Blair is on it? I've never heard of it. How would I have never heard of this? But no, awesome to see you blow up. Excited to see you on potentially a broadcast or two, but hey, firstly, how you doing? Have you been following this chaos in Bucharest, and what's your take on it so far?
I have. Look, first of all, I'll say maybe it's a bit of an indictment on me as a person that you didn't hear about me until a year ago. I guess that just goes to show how much most of the world cares about Counter-Strike in Oceania and in Asia.
It's really hard with the time zones. Like, I just can't.
I don't blame you. But I have been casting for 10 years, so there is that. Anyways, look, I've been good. I've been on this EU time zone because I'm doing another show for overnighters, and so I have been able to kind of catch up with what's going on in Bucharest. It's nice to kind of be like feeling like part of the Counter-Strike world, you know, being able to actually watch Counter-Strike that other people are watching and caring about, as opposed to just kind of being relegated to the stuff that's on my time zone. And obviously when we've got Melbourne coming up soon as well, it's kind of nice to, you know, get back in tune with some of the teams that are going to be there and keeping an eye on things. So yeah, I've been good. The overnighters are definitely killing. Like, you can see some crazy looking eye bags here. I don't think the light's doing any favors to me today, but yeah, I'm feeling good. I'm glad to be on this amazing broadcast and ready to go to kind of dominate you guys at your own game. That's really all I have to say about it. So let's see how we go.
I mean, traditionally we've been okay, but the viewers also sometimes do win because we give them a lot of points, or, you know, the guests that we get actually do make some good picks. Maybe that's part of, you know, letting them pick the picking order. I don't really know. But yeah, maybe a bit of an indictment.
We have to be nice. We can't just stick them in first position every time anymore.
Yeah, well, we did that once upon a time, and it's like, wait a second, they actually get put in a weird position. So
yeah, we're now generous, and that does make it more competitive. Last year, I still think I won last year, but it was on a razor's edge. So we'll see. So far this year, as we said, it's been terrible for me. But look, you've chosen to go second. That means I've been forced into first position, which I don't really like, but it does at least mean I get one pick that's surely not going to fail. Number one pick, I'm not going to do anything silly. I'm just going to take Vitality. Because, hey,
what a surprise.
I'm not here to be controversial, different, shocking. As you can tell, not exactly a punk guy. I'm very, you know, by the numbers, stick to the laws, all that good stuff. Vitality should be winning this event. Look, they may not establish the most dominant era in all of CS2. I mean, I've seen some hot takes thrown around. I've seen some ideas put forth. I'm sure at some point someone will break them, someone will form another team. But currently, as it stands, they have firepower 1 through 5, a superstar at the top of the pecking order, and some riflers who've been absolutely banger since they've figured out their, like, small blips they had in the first couple matches they played. They had some rough-looking T-sides, a few CT sides that could have been better. But then all of a sudden, it's just clicked, it's rolling, they haven't lost. I don't think they will, at least not at this event. This is far too soon. We'll see when it comes to the major, because that's usually when the big lights come on, and all of a sudden, you know, the small cracks of the great teams might start to show. You know, even the teams who've won 6 events straight couldn't hold it together at certain majors. So I feel like these guys are destined to dominate until that point, at which point I think someone else will have come along to maybe upset them. But for now, not enough rosters have the firepower to contend, and they still have solid calling to go with it. There's nothing wrong with the Vitality pick here.
Do you think they win the tournament? Because that's the whole conversation about Vitality, is like the Grand Slam is right there for the taking.
I think they win this.
Do we firmly? So you believe that they win the Grand Slam in their first attempt, just straight up? Instantly before the major.
I mean, I have to say, like, the Grand Slam, the prestige of it is going to break their mental. I don't think they're that bothered. I think they're just going to go and win it.
No, I mean, I agree. I think, like, to be honest, if I was first pick, obviously Vitality would have been my pick as well. I think Yumi, you know, if you would say otherwise, you'd probably be trolling, to be quite honest. I mean, they do seem like the pretty obvious choice. So I mean, what really is there to say? The only thing I would have to sort of throw in the mix here is that sometimes weird things happen when we have teams down under. If we look back at some of the previous events in Sydney, there's always been like one team that's kind of just like shit the bed in some way that you wouldn't have necessarily expected. Actually, last time around it was Vitality. I think this was just after Zonic had left the Vitality roster in 2023 when they came to Sydney. I'm pretty sure they got knocked out in last place, or they definitely got knocked out in groups.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they went 0-2. So it was like, wow, okay, that's crazy. Obviously, they weren't that same team that they are today, but they definitely were not a 0-2 team in groups. And I think there are sometimes instances where teams, I don't know what to put it down to. Is it the time zone? Is it the travel? Is it this and that? Obviously, it's a little bit more extensive than what they would typically be used to, just doing all of this around Europe business. So I think there is something to be said that some teams can come to Sydney, or in this case, obviously Melbourne, and be a little bit surprised by something. I don't know what it necessarily is. I'm not necessarily insinuating that that's going to happen with Vitality here, but I think there's probably going to be one or two teams that we expect to do well that are going to come to Melbourne and just not deliver in some way, shape, or form, because that just seems to be a recurring trend with these events in Australia.
Weirdly, I actually wouldn't want to pick Vitality first coming into this event.
Oh, all right.
Mainly because I just feel like they're due a loss. Like, I've been feeling this for a while, and it feels like the gap is shrinking slightly in terms of, you know, their tactical edge, or, you know, even player individual player ability. Yes, it is. Like, this is the best looking roster Vitality has ever put together in terms of performance. Like, if we're just looking at tournament streaks or results, and, you know, even if we try and create an arbitrary metric through which we judge an anchor or an entry, and we create that criteria, I think this is the best team they've ever put together. But I do think they've gone through a period where they haven't actually had as much strife as some other teams when they're building up into, you know, being one of the best rosters an organization has ever had. So I just feel like Vitality are genuinely due an event where they look more shaky, or they have more issues. And, you know, I don't necessarily think it's to do with the Grand Slam, but I understand that that's going to be something itching in the back of their heads, that, oh, Grand Slam, and then we've got the Major. They understand that they're big favorites for both of those things to be accomplished. And I just think they're not going to give it their all, weirdly, at Melbourne. Maybe partially because of the time zone shift and, you know, the travel schedule and all that. So
I do have to say, the Melbourne event isn't playing the same format as that Sydney 2023, because it was Vitality last place. The caveat is they lost in OT to BetBoom in a BO1 on Mirage.
Yep, I was casting that, actually. I remember casting it. It was a mess because that was also just after CS2 got released as well. So that may have also been a bit of a factor. Yeah. And like literally everyone was missing the window smoke on Mirage. I think they played Mirage, right, against BetBoom.
They did.
There was probably, I would say, like at least 10 rounds where the window smoke was missed. The instant window smoke from spawn was missed in that game. It was just madness. Like, it wasn't a normal game of Counter-Strike, just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, vetoing into Mirage against Chiron just, to me, seems like a dumb idea. He's just a Mirage home map. If you want to lose a BO1 to BetBoom at that time, play Mirage. That's the only way to do it. But then they go down to face a FaZe who just lost a BO1 to GamerLegion, and then lose 2-1. I mean, yeah, it's a fluke result. But when you look into it, you're like, oh, okay, so it's a close BO1 followed by a close BO3. They didn't massively underperform. They weren't that bothered by, I guess, you know, the time difference shift. Just probably a bit of silliness coming around with the game change. I think Vitality are a very different beast in themselves. And as well, the format is far more rigid. You know, it's supportive of better teams beating the lesser ones time and time again, because we do have the extra 2 maps for them to claw it back and really show their dominance. So Vitality, for me, are a no-brainer. We'll see if the cracks start to appear with the pressure of, well, greatness, you know, looming on the hill.
All right. Is it my turn then?
It is. You've got a pick now.
Look, I think the thing is, I don't want to be that boring guy, but I am that boring guy, you know, and so I'm just going to go Spirit as my, favorite, as my favorite pick.
Yes.
I think they've been that team that's just sitting behind Vitality the entire year. So if you're going to go Vitality and take Vitality out, obviously that leaves Spirit for me. There was a little bit of thought in my mind as to maybe whether or not I should pick MOUZ here. You guys can obviously touch on that, I guess. But I think when I look at the results, Spirit, typically speaking, have, like I said, just been that team that's right behind Vitality in some cases. Obviously, they've lost to Vitality in the semifinals, and then they've ended up third, fourth, and it's kind of been like, oh, well, they're only third, fourth at this tournament, but it's like, well, they did go on to actually lose to the eventual winner. There has been obviously one loss for them against MOUZ in that little tenure as well, but generally speaking, I think they've just kind of been that more consistent force over MOUZ, which again, like I said, was kind of the other option to me. So it seems like they're a pretty obvious choice. Now, again, in previous instances, I know that a lot of teams that have never been to Australia before have sometimes had a bit of a rude awakening. I've even seen it at things like the ESL Challenger Melbournes that we've had when some of those teams have come over and they've just kind of gotten booked. And I think they've just not been prepared for it in terms of a time zone or whatnot. So maybe that'll be a thing because I know that these guys haven't had that kind of a travel schedule before. They've never been down under. As it were. So we'll see what happens with regard to Spirit. But I think, like, again, it kind of speaks for itself, right? It feels like it's kind of the obvious choice. And yeah, I have to be that boring guy that's just going to go for the obvious choice in this instance. I think I'll have some spicier ones when we get to the underdogs.
Donk and who? Like genuinely, when you're watching Spirit, it's like Donk and who shows up. Because to be honest, right now, Zontix is playing very good Counter-Strike. Like individually, he's hitting more headshots than people give him credit for. And two, his decision making is looking good. But oh my god, where is Shiro sometimes, and where is Magix? Magix in particular has been playing terribly since the major, if I'm being perfectly honest. And Shiro has great games on occasion. He also just has games where he just effectively has no impact. And I just think, wow, if I just had 15% more aggression, or if this guy, it feels like he's not trying to win rounds sometimes, which I don't necessarily think is his role, but also, when you're a star level AWPer, like surely you try and push yourself forward, because we saw what you could do at the end of Cloud9 when the team wasn't working. How much he could brute force things and try and put his team on his back, and he just never even tries to do that with Spirit if things aren't going right on a secondary star front.
I mean, my thing is kind of just that I don't think that the field is really that strong at IEM Melbourne, which is kind of funny to say, but like in general, it feels like a lot of teams are kind of going through a bit of a rebuild period. Things are looking a little bit wonky. Like, you look at Liquid, what happened to them in Bucharest, and Mongolz seem like they're kind of a bit wishy-washy at the moment. They're on a bit of a downward trend, I would personally say. FaZe, again, up and down. NAVI, up and down. Pain, are they really part of that conversation just yet? FlyQuest, obviously FlyQuest. MOUZ are looking good, but it's still kind of like not a massive sample size just yet. Falcons, who knows what's happening with them because of this whole Monacy business. Yeah. VP have been up and down. They looked awful in that game against Rare Atom. I mean, GamerLegion have looked okay. 3D Max have looked okay. I'll give them some credit. But then again, like, they're not on that same level in terms of a conversation point. And then just to finish off the list, because we're at that point now, MIB are big and sore. Do you really see them reliably beating a team like Spirit? Probably not. So I think there's definitely a lot of like arguments. For me, it's like almost there's more arguments against other teams than there are for someone like a Spirit. It's just that they're like that next best team behind Vitality in my mind that doesn't have as maybe as many negatives, even if they are, still like in some senses of the word, a bit of a question mark. So I'm feeling pretty confident about this one as a pick personally. I just think that, yeah, they're pretty comfortable in this position because a lot of the other teams are in a bit of a wonky spot. But then again, that can cause some craziness in the results. So I guess we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
No, it does make sense. Look, the debate right now that we're actually having isn't who's number one. It's number two. The number two spot is what's really in contention. Is it MOUZ? Is it Spirit? Because MOUZ have won the matchups. It's just we're all still, as you kind of implied there, we're talking about the sample size, living in a, is this real? Well, like, it's the opening of Bohemian Rhapsody. Like, is this the real world? Or is this just fantasy? Like, are we actually going to see MOUZ play like this for the rest of the year? Or is it going to fall off? We're going to naturally see the struggles of being a new IGL, having to deal with big personalities. Is Brolan going to be able to continue to be that leadership figure? All those questions could still arise. For now, I'd still be more comfortable picking MOUZ. I still prefer the roster construction in terms of like, where's my weak point? I don't really feel it. Even if I do have question marks for specific players in specific moments, like, Xertion, the biggest stage, maybe not. Torji, can he get himself activated on the T side consistently? There's small question marks, but relative to will Magix not be shit? Will Shiro not bait? I much prefer having to answer those questions than that. So I see the Spirit pick, and the reason I do think it's actually the better pick than MOUZ, as much as I've just built that case up, is that every event you attend, there's an off chance that Donk and who, you don't need an answer. Because Donk and fucking anything even nothing,
Yeah.
could be enough to just stomp through to a grand final win. So I do like the pick. I do think it's pretty strong. And as much as we say Vitality are, due for a bit of a loss, Spirit are due for a crazy donk run,
win.
stomping through and winning an event just off the back of it.
I mean, I think the only other thing on that conversation point is like, are you valuing the tenure of a team like Spirit versus the current form of a team like MOUZ? Like that again is where you're making a bit of an argument that I think probably over the longer medium term, Spirit have been the better team, but then in the more immediate, like last two months or so, MOUZ have probably had the form that Spirit maybe haven't necessarily had. So what are you leaning more into? I tend to be someone that leans into a longer history personally. I value that a little bit more than the more immediate form. So that's again part of the reason why I've gone Spirit.
I
Yeah,
want
fair
them to
enough.
bomb out so that they can get Kyosuke or Kyosuke in time for the
Before
majors.
Falcons take him.
Well, they're in a weird position where they either sell him off to the Falcons, who are probably going to be paying exorbitant amounts of money for effectively a rookie player, or they employ him themselves, but they're going to have to basically outbid the Falcons to do that. So,
Yeah.
Kyosuke says he's comfortable speaking in English, but I'm sure if he, got the chance on the main Spirit team, he would take it, So they're in a very strange position where it's like, we can either make a load of money or we could end up spending a lot of money salary-wise to try and keep him on our team instead. It doesn't... Yeah, they're in a very strange position because I want them to take that step as fast as possible so that, one, he gets experience, we get to see what he's like on that type of arena. But then I think it also just solves some of their problems. Even if I don't think, like, Kyosuke role-wise fits well, they can make Donk a little bit more baity if they really need to.
Yeah, no, the guy can close a round. We've seen it. It's not that he has to be an entry. It's just give him rifle duels. It doesn't matter what the context is. He's going to win them. And bringing Kyosuke in and giving him more of the entry stuff, I mean, I can see how it works. It's just at this point, if you're Falcons, you're offering huge money. We saw the ROI on the Munacy risk G2 take. Like, I think literally we're talking 600k into a 2 million. Like, sort of, that's what they bought him for, that's what they sold him for. Add in a few titles along the way and an ever-growing fan base. And you see that's an insane return on that investment. You should be charging a Falcons like $3-4 million for a player like this. Like, at this age with this talent, he should be worth an insane amount. The salary they can offer, I don't think will ever match what Falcons can offer. But they have to essentially get him to buy into the idea of, we can be the super team. Essentially that no one can ever be.
And then the team won't work. That's what everybody's...
That's always the case, right? That's always an option when you add a crazy good player to any lineup. Technically, there's a chance. It just doesn't work. But hey, that's right. That's true for both teams. And I think, MouZ, you have the next 2 picks.
Yeah.
Are you gonna deviate? Are you gonna go back to the double underdog strategy? Like, what's the picking strats like?
Nah, I'm gonna go 1-1 because I think there's enough value up here. But then, yeah, whatever. I'm gonna go MOUZ anyway. Like, this is a very straightforward underdog or favorite pick rather. I mean, these guys have been able to make it. This team I was expecting just to be a total write-off for this season as soon as I saw the Brolin move. But I've been consistently impressed with their mid-rounding. Like, this is the one team that I see in Tier 1 right now, outside of Vitality and all the shenanigans they get up to. But anytime you see them in a 3vx scenario in the mid-round, they always find ways out. Like, and it happens against teams like Vitality as well. It's not as though any team is so elite that they're exempt from that ruling. The caliber of players on MOUZ actually just constantly create opportunities, and whether that's Xerxin or even Brolin in some of these mid rounds, I just do genuinely believe that they have like an unending amount of threats in any given moment in a game. So I've been enjoying them on that front. I don't think they're the most tactical team in the world. I don't truthfully believe that the calling, like, if I'm thinking about like from spawn calling is exceptional and Berlin's got it all figured out. But they've got good ideas, and players will try and lead their teammates out of the fog or through the darkness as best as possible. Like, people are willing to step up in those moments, and it's actually quite fun to watch. It almost provides me a level of old MOUZ where they had like all the structure on CT sides, pushing areas and blah blah blah. And instead, now it's more on T sides that I've been enjoying the work that they do.
Yeah, I can see the passion. I see the love. I don't know about you, Jordan, but for me, MOUZ are a demo that I don't watch individuals anymore. Like, it has to. I have to look at it from the macro view just to appreciate everything they're doing on the map, because there's too many things to keep track of often in terms of all the individuals. Maybe not necessarily they're being called into these plays, but the way they play their roles and the way they play the areas they're in. There's just something really satisfying about seeing it all in the big picture. I don't know about you, but I really like that.
Yeah, look, I've got nothing bad necessarily to say about MOUZ, especially given the circumstances. I think you kind of really hope for anything better than what they've gotten since putting Brolin in that IGL role. So I think they would have been the obvious pick for me as well if I were going third here. We obviously had a bit of a conversation about that with the whole Spirit versus MOUZ discussion when I made my pick anyway. So I don't know there's necessarily too much for me to say here. The only thing is, like, is it a honeymoon period, right? And that's the only kind of factor that we haven't really discussed when it comes to MOUZ. Whether that's going to all come crashing down just at the wrong time. Have they had a couple of good tournaments and then all of a sudden something bad's going to happen just ahead of the major? And could it be here? I mean, maybe that's obviously a possibility, but I just think generally speaking, as you guys have sort of touched on, they have a base level that's kind of good enough to get them through what you need them to get through. And then, we'll see what happens beyond that. So yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely a good enough team to what is it, to make it to the final? Is that what this favorites is
favorites? Your favorite towards? It's towards winning.
To win.
Generally, you get points from about the semi-final onwards. So if they make the semi, you get a point. They make the grand final to win 3.
I think they should be a shoe-in. They should really be a shoe-in for probably a top 4, if not at least. Like, they should definitely be making the playoffs. And they probably, based on who's left in the unpicked favorites discussion here, I think they should be beating every other team that hasn't been picked already. So that should probably be the answer there, right there. So I'll have them as third as well, probably, if I was making that third choice.
Yeah, I mean, just to dig in a bit, is there a weakness beyond the Brolan calling situation that we are yet to see or yet to realize exists? Like, is there something that's not going to work in MOUZ? I mean, either one of you can take this if you have thoughts.
I don't think so. Like, to me, it doesn't feel like it necessarily, at least not at the moment. Like, this team, this core at least, has been together long enough that I feel like if there was going to be anything outrageously bad, it would have been exposed by now. So outside of Brolin being a bit of an X factor, a bit of a question mark, like, I think we're going to just get that general level that we've been expecting from MOUZ for the better part of now, what has it been, like 12, 18, like, I remember seeing this MOUZ play at, I think they played at IEM Sydney, and that was like just prior to the point where they had started to like really get like good into like that top 4 kind of discussion or consistently making a top 4 kind of position. And I think, yeah, since that point, they've kind of not really skipped a beat. Like, there's been some off events here and there, but like, generally speaking, like, we've got the level, we've got the output that we wanted from them. So I think my answer to that question at the moment is no, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with what you were saying, T, about, Torji and involvement on T sides. Super good on CT. I think he's calling a lot of stuff on CT as well. Based on the
he's very vocal, and honestly, he's been doing the same kind of, he's been creative, high flare, high production CT oppo since he was on Hungarian teams. I don't think there's any IGL who's ever taken him and microed him around. He's always just had that panache, when the way he plays the AWP. So that's all him.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we talked about it on a previous show. But I do believe like the shackles are off almost as well with him on ever since the in-game leader swap. I feel like his performance on CT side was already good, but now it's even better because it does feel like the game revolves around him a little bit more, and he's actually got a very good read on like where they should rotate, how he should be positioned. I think the one dissatisfaction I have with MOUZ is just kind of gym fat. I've never really been truthfully super sold on this guy. I don't think he's that clutch. I don't think he's that exceptional in his spots. But he does pull off some very important multi-kills in games where you do think, you see the potential there. I feel like he doesn't shy away for an entire game. He has his moments. But I don't see him as like truly a superstar. Like, I could sell you Zershin to another team and go like entry fragger, super dedicated to the cause, head down. I could sell you Spinks, lurker, extraordinaire, actually quite clutch, maybe a bit baity, but we'll find his impact. Torji, I feel like Brolin is the only one that really contests him for, like, I don't know if I could sell this guy to another roster in good conscience and think, he's going to immediately improve a team. I don't think GymFat's playing up to that caliber or that standard, and I wouldn't go so far as to call him fraudulent, but I don't think he's warranted as much of the conversation about, you know, great anchors and great individual players, because I actually see him drop the ball in terms of decision making, actually just on the micro in his spot more often than I think he should at this level.
Okay, that's an interesting point. I think for a while we've taken it sort of for granted just because of how he played last year. As a young player coming in, he was one of the few MOUZ players who never really broke in terms of the big games. Like, he still had, he put up his usual rating. Sure, that usual rating was barely over a 1.0, but considering the spots, considering the difficulty of having to constantly deal with, you know, 2 dead players and a bit of panic in the team, we thought he held it together pretty well. So, no, I think a new narrative to kind of start addressing, I guess, is GymFat worthy of that hype? I don't know. I still, as a guy who was looking at him in MOUZ and XT and even a little bit in the Finnish teams before, which was a bit of a different experience, I still think he's an incredibly valuable piece relative to the positions he plays. I think, the superstar luster of like the best anchor support, hard support player we have is starting to fade a little bit. We're not quite that excited as we used to be.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of it was maybe even like the Shuhei design, you know, and ever since that shift, I feel like he's really struggling to know whether he should take that risk or whether he should, you know, play more defensive. I feel like it's just like that minor detail where he's lacking a little bit of that finesse, so to speak.
Yeah. All right, well, you have another pick. You said you were going to go 1-1. Which underdog has taken your fancy?
I'm just going to take him because I don't think I'll get the opportunity later. I'm going to go GamerLegion. I've decided as an underdog, they are... I mean, we've talked about GamerLegion and this organization enough. I mean, Rez looks great. Towson is becoming my new favorite player to root for because, oh my god, I didn't really know much about this guy like individually before, but I feel like I watch him and I think so many of his decisions are so logical, and then he hits some great shots as well. And then that's not even to say anything about like PR, who is just like a high flair player. Maybe he didn't have the greatest Bucharest outing, but yeah, I think just
only leads the team in rating, but yeah, he's not been that great in Bucharest.
But he has had games where he has just like not had like entry impacts. These guys are just total troopers. So GamerLegion are going to always be a very firm favorite underdog pick, and maybe even don't deserve to be in that underdog category based on the way that they are in the rankings.
They are because of the timing when we're doing this. I'm going to be honest. There's no way VP and Falcons don't drop below 3D Max and GamerLegion by the time we actually get to Melbourne. But here you are. You've got the fortune to be able to pick them as an underdog still, and
it's a value pick for sure. You look at that, you're like, oh, that's buck. That's money. That's mega bucks. Like I'm taking that as well. Look, I mean, that's like that's the one I would have taken as well. Maybe not. I mean, look, there's a couple of other teams in there in the underdog category that they're somewhat interesting, but I think it's pretty hard to go past GamerLegion. Their runs recently, look, they haven't been like outstanding. They haven't necessarily been like world beating or anything like that. But that's kind of the point of this underdog spot. It's like you're supposed to get the guys that you think you're going to get some value out of, and I think I kind of agree with you in that. GamerLegion are that team. There's a lot of hype around them right now. Obviously, they're getting a lot done with a little, in a sense, and they have always gotten a lot done with a little. And I think that's like the perfect analogy, really, for an underdog pick, isn't it? So, they would have been my pick too. So, yeah, credit. Good job, Yumi.
Yeah, they're lovely. The one concern you can have, I guess, is the one thing we've brought up in the past has always been the Slend problem. Like, is he that great an AWPer? Could you make a change in that position? If you did, who'd you bring in? And now, there's been a lot of rumors about AWPs moving up, specifically the CIS duo of actually beastly talents. Yumi, do you buy into this idea that you could just plug and play a player like, for example, the rumors talking Molodoy into even GamerLegion? Like, there's talk of him going all the way as high up as G2, but do you see that working as like a 1-for-1, just bring him in for Slend? Or do you think there's too much like of a system in play that he would maybe need to adapt to that probably limits what he can do?
I think so long as Ash is there, it's all more about like personality and work ethic, because it does really feel as though players don't play like they've got like a massive ego on GamerLegion, and when they're underneath that organization, that almost feels like a necessary criteria. They have to understand who they are in terms of identity and like what kind of playstyle they enjoy and play, and that they are willing to take concessions and give space away to teammates. I feel I can't remember the last player that's been through GamerLegion that maybe didn't have that totally down pat. Maybe Volt, I guess, in terms of like just roster moves. Wasn't someone that had like a firm identity in play style. But yeah, I don't think it's as easy as plugging and playing. Unless they've played under somebody that's hyper strategic or is willing to information dump in the same capacity that I expect GamerLegion do. Yeah, I think it's a hard fit, and people will end up looking a shell of themselves.
Yeah, that's roughly where I was thinking you'd go with that, because I don't like any of the sort of like mega talent, just put a guy in there sort of options you have for GamerLegion. It's always my concern is you need to firstly, honestly, there's still the concern for me of, can he speak good enough English to be in a team that's this precise? And it's nothing personal, it's just, I think you do need that level of comprehension.
And has to talk to a British guy the whole time.
Yeah,
like
who understands the British?
Mm.
Absolute gibberish what comes out of their mouths. So, no, I think GamerLegion are still absolutely banging, though. And honestly, for me, what makes it work is that rifle duo. Rez and PR are just so fun to watch right now. I mean, Rez, crisp and clean, and honestly, performing like we haven't seen in years. Like, we haven't seen that from him for a long time. But PR's a talent. I mean, I knew he had it. He was a prospect. I did make a video. I was like, yeah, he's blah, 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 so good, so good. But then to see him just come out on, like, not the big stage yet, but against big names, big teams, and kind of just fully buy into GamerLegion and be like, yeah, okay, I can just BM the hell out of them. Like, if you watched his Mirage demo against Falcons, he's not playing like he's playing against major winning, XYZ, like top player, whatever, of the year 17 times in a row, whatever Nico is. He just looks like a guy who's smurfing, just constantly peeking, just taking shots, taking fights, and just winning them over and over again. And it's immensely satisfying to see an element of, I guess, chaotic flair in what is usually a very structured team. Seeing a player just individually let loose and just go hit headshots. Mm. Oh, that was so satisfying. And yeah, GamerLegion, exciting team, but also a great value down there. Mm. Now we're back to you, Jordan. You have a pick now as well.
Okay.
A lot of options still to go. I mean, the top three teams off the board and probably the top underdog, but I think there's still some value in here somewhere.
I think there is definitely. I think I'm going to go for a favorite here, just because I feel like there's less good picks left in the favorites category than there is in the underdogs category for me. So I'm going to go Mongolz, which I think is like, it sort of feels a little bit scary for me to be saying this at the moment, just because of the way Mongolz have been looking in their sort of most recent few appearances. I definitely think they've fallen off from their peak a little bit, which it really hurts me to say. Like, my whole brand kind of at the moment is just being a Mongolz fanboy, so I should be coming in here and picking them as my first favorite, being the Asia CS connoisseur, I guess. But I just don't think you can realistically say that about them at the moment, which is why it's almost a little bit scary for me to go, is Mongolz going to be that next pick in the favorites category here? But then I look at what else we've got to pick in favorites, and NAVI, FaZe, Falcons, or Virtus.pro. I don't think you can necessarily have any more faith in any of those teams over the Mongolz right now. For me, it was a decision between probably NAVI and the Mongolz for that second favorite slot. But I think I'm going to go the Mongolz just because I think they have, generally speaking, looked a little bit better than NAVI of late. Although obviously their very recent form has been a little bit concerning. The start to Bucharest, definitely a concern for me. And they haven't, was it Lisbon? They almost made it to playoffs, didn't quite manage to make it to playoffs, where they lost to, I think, G2. So there's been a few of these results where they're like, if it was 6 months ago, if you would copy paste those results 6 months ago or 12 months ago, we'd be sitting there going, man, these guys are awesome. They're the best Asia team of all time. Yeah, woo. But I think the expectations have kind of leveled up a little bit for the Mongolz, where it's like, guys, you have to be making playoffs now, and you probably need to be making top 4, at least top 6, depending on the format, to make me happy, to make the Asia CS fans happy. So I think they've kind of just fallen off of that a little bit, where they're sometimes just slightly maybe looking like they might miss out on playoffs. Obviously, this Bucharest run, I don't know when you guys are releasing this video, but it depends on how they go with this last game in I think, are they playing against Falcons? So, if they win or lose that game will be a big deciding factor in how things look going into IEM Melbourne for the Mongolz. But I still think that you've got that like that peak potential available for the Mongolz. Like that's the thing. They have such a strong rifling core. Obviously 910 is really quite solid on his day as well as an AWPer. So I think they're a good enough team to, you know, top 4 an event like IEM Melbourne. I don't think there's any question about that. Whether or not they can win, that's again kind of like that next step that we've been waiting for a team like the Mongolz for a very long time. They haven't, to me, like won a big S tier tournament. They've top 4'd at some of these tournaments. They've top 8'd at the major. So they can get almost there, but they can't get quite there. They can't get over that hump that is vitality and spirit a lot of the time. And fair enough, you know, we're not necessarily expecting them to do that, but I think there's that potential still for the Mongolz to kind of hit that peak level, which has them be competitive with the best teams in the world. But for me, the concern is like that base level when they're playing their B game. Is their B game going to be good enough to beat the FaZe, the Falcons, the NAVI, the GamerLegion, you know, some of these other teams in the underdog pick? Sometimes I could see them definitely losing that matchup when some of the guys go missing, you know, Blitz and Techno, obviously. And I think a big thing as well is if Senzu goes missing. Like if Senzu just has an off day, it's like, okay, you lose just such a big part of your firepower in this roster. So there's a few sort of, I guess, issues with the Mongolz at the moment, but they're still good enough, in my opinion, to have them be my second favorite pick. So I'll take it.
Yeah, the question I have essentially, Yumi, I know obviously you were the original Mongolz guy on this show, a huge fan of the team. Hopefully you've been watching closely. Is there something that's changed, like tactically, something that's not going right, or like the way they're playing? Or is it just maybe they've been rattled by that G2 loss and it's just a lack of confidence that's seen them play, honestly, the last four series they've played, lost or played way too close against teams they should be obliterating? Like, is it confidence or is it something just not working right now?
I'd like to just firstly get this out there that when I have watched Geographically Challenged in the past, you know, I don't feel like I was the first one to, you know, obviously on this show you did preface,
Yes.
but like when I watched Geographically Challenged, it did increase my hopium more when I watched teams starting to rise, and I'm like, I do believe they can make it, but then seeing the sheer passion, I was like, should I be this excited for it? I'm not sure, but I'm getting.
Is it cope, or are they actually that good?
Yeah, it's like I'm kind of getting there though. And I feel like Jordan, you're almost kind of investing in them. Like you got into ground zero with everybody else, and then now you're almost buying into the dip a bit more. It's like you're double dipping.
Well,
with
my thing is like, I think we've seen the level that they can hit, and the question is going to be, and it's the same maybe as what we were talking about with MOUZ. It's like we can see how good they can be. Can they do that on a consistent basis? Mongolz, we've seen that they can be a top 8 team in the world quite comfortably. We've seen them be able to push into the top 4 in some of these tournaments. Are they going to be able to do that on a consistent basis? Are they going to be a consistent force to kind of like represent Mongolia, represent Asia, represent that region? Or are they going to be like many other Asia teams in the past, kind of like a one-hit wonder? If you go back and look at some of the results that previous, you know, like Tyloo rosters have had, where there was like a 6-month period where Tyloo was a top 10 team in the world. This was back in 2018, so many people probably don't even remember that. But like there was times where like there were Asia teams that were like, oh, these guys are actually pretty good. They're contesting at the top. And then they did that for 6 months and then they dropped off. And now we're kind of at that point where Mongolz have been kind of in and around the tier 1 sphere for, let's say, 12 months or so. And we're now starting to see like a slight little decline in terms of their form. Is that going to be the start of a very increasing slip and slide where they kind of go back to like, oh, just being a top 20 team in the world, like maybe someone like a FlyQuest, for example? Or are they going to get over that and they're going to consistently again be for like the next 2 or 3 years in that conversation in the same way that like a FaZe would be, for example, where it's like you know they're never going to be like a dog shit team. They're never going to be outside of probably the top 10 in the world in some. So that's kind of what we're kind of waiting to see, whether Mongolz are going to be that kind of a force. And I think like you said, I'm kind of buying into this dip in that, okay, this is just going to be a little bit of a dip right now. Hopefully they're going to peak for the major. We're going to see some good stuff again there, and we're right back on track for the Mongolz and for Asia in general. But right now, it's obviously a bit wishy-washy, I'd say.
Yeah. Now, and just to make sure I answer your question, T, in terms of like whether or not I think there's anything that's identifiably wrong with them, I think that's maybe the worst part, is that like it's not as though I can just look at one player and go, oh, he's not doing his job, or he's not performing in his role, or the like tactically they don't look like they've got enough depth. I think that's maybe the biggest criticism I'd ever give the Mongolz, is that they don't really feel like they've got multiple layers to dive back into. They go for like very committed decisions, and you know they've got like they'll go for sort of scouting party type plays where they'll start clustering 3 and just going spots, and then they can create like 2 lurking opportunities, or 4-1 executes. I think that sort of variety is nice. It's just the depth of their players is usually good enough individually that they can sort of manage through it. And yeah, a lot of that is predicated off of, Blitz has to have a pretty solid game overall for this team to look threatening in terms of entering the top 8 conversation. If he goes missing or Senzu goes absent, I don't know that I can reliably get a 9-10 masterclass, or Mizzino stepping up, or Techno even, breaking out of his shell, which I think he has done more and more with this team. And I think my main problem with the Mongolz right now is, like, I don't, usually I've been pretty good at seeing the talent that they're going to pick up ahead of time and thinking this is a guy that really could make it. Like Senzu, before all the skin drama and all that stuff, probably was one of those guys, and maybe like Yami or something along those lines. But I think with the way that their roster move philosophy has ended up going, they like picking up high potential young players and molding them into something better. And I can't even look at somebody in the space right now that I could identify as being like, this is the next guy up. And maybe he'll be found in the Mongolian local LAN cafes.
It's possible.
That is entirely possible, where it's like, he's not even got any games on officials, but hell, we thought he was great in this 10-man we did at LAN. And it would be a shame.
Although they're not playing domestically, so maybe not. Like, they're really not playing that much domestically anymore. That's the difference between when they got 9-10 and MZinho, where they would have at least had some exposure to some of that domestic, I guess, LAN culture or what have you. I just don't know how much time are they actually spending playing domestically in Mongolia anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that is totally fair. And also, I just feel like the vibe in the team is like really good right now. Like, they all seem like they're like good friends with each other. Whereas before they're a bit more strictly business, moving along. Maybe that's just because we get more interviews and we just see like the bubbly smiles and personality and whatever.
It's MZinho. It's the MZinho diff, I think, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think anybody hates that guy. So yeah, I think that's my problem with the Mongolz. Like, I don't see the next roster move, and maybe I didn't see 9-10 coming, but even past that, like picking up a star rifler should be. Or picking up another great supportive piece that's maybe a bit more moldable and maybe a bit more reliable than Techno in terms of like individual performance, and stepping up as the veteran. Yeah, I just don't see it right now, which is, I guess, a little worrying for Mongolz in terms of like the longevity conversation.
Yeah, well, they are incredibly young, so I've always had that to lean on. If I'm coping, right? If I see this streak extend of them not being reliable and powerful, I'm like, well, look, they're still basically kids. You can always see them blossom a little further, give us a little more, and it'll just work itself out. I don't have to go replacing anyone just yet. But for me, this does really feel like I saw that G2 Mongolz game, as much as I thought that was an insane performance from G2. Like, I've never seen them so ready, so well prepped, and honestly, so on it tactically. At the same point, it might have also felt like for Mongolz, holy crap, this is a team we usually, like, for the last time we played them, we beat them. We play teams of this caliber quite a bit now, and we tend to win. All of a sudden get outclassed. Might shake your belief in yourself, like, down to your core, like, we're maybe not who we think we are. We're not, like, top 5. We're not on that level. So it might be just a crisis of confidence, I think, just temporarily. Hopefully temporarily.
I think to me, it's almost more so the results at Bucharest that have kind of got me questioning a little bit, because I think when it comes to G2, you've got, okay, look, it's G2.
Yeah, for us, but I mean for them.
They've got that X factor, like, whatever, don't worry about it too much, but like, you're losing to Apogee 2-0 as well, might I add. Okay, they've had some rougher matchups in the past against 3D Max as well. There seems to be like a little bit of a problem maybe for Mongolz getting over 3D Max. I think that was the team that they lost to last year at the Sky Esports Championship Masters, whatever the name of that tournament that was. That was a grand final. I think it was 3D Max versus Mongolz, and they lost in that final against 3D Max. They've lost here against 3D Max as well. So yeah, a couple of like, I don't know, the Bucharest results are the ones that have me going, okay, this could actually be more of a problem than what it is just, like one out there lost to G2. So we'll see if it develops into anything more. That's the thing. Like, I think we're kind of at that point where it's like, it's probably still a little bit too early to tell when it comes to the Mongolz, if they've significantly fallen off in form, or if this is just a little bit of a dip ahead of like another new peak. So I have that benefit of the doubt still to give them heading into obviously the major and IM Melbourne and stuff like that.
yeah, there could be a number of factors. Young team, a lot of travel. There's so many things that could play into it. So, on to me and my 2 picks now. I really hate where I'm left with the favorites, and I've really discounted. I've discounted 2 of them already as being, by the time we get to the actual event, no longer really favorites. I don't think VP and Falcons will still be in that slot when we get to it. And I have to make the difficult decision between Navi and FaZe, which last year may not have seemed like such a difficult decision or such a perilous place to be left in, especially not in the second half of the year. But, Lord, whose form do I believe will recover between these 2?
I've got something that might bait you. FaZe have a 50% win rate in Australia. Just saying.
What, event win rate or just
yeah, they've literally won 50% of the events that they've played at in Australia. Or actually, were they even at the first one? They weren't at the first one, so they might have a 66% win rate of the events they've played at. But 50% of big S-tier tournaments in Australia they've won. Just saying.
Okay.
That's pick worthy.
It would be if, that mattered to me, but it doesn't.
Oh, well, that's disappointing then, isn't it?
It's like Furia only winning in Finland. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Totally the same. I kinda, I am still gonna pick FaZe, but not for those reasons.
He's convinced.
Not for those reasons. Those reasons.
I can't believe you sold him on it.
Too easy, man.
It's mostly that I've been too generous to Navi this year. I've treated them like the number 3 team without hesitation, and it punished me over and over again, because every time I picked them, they would, just not make a final, not really win any big games. And it keep reminding me that, actually, no, this Navi team isn't what everyone else says they are. They're what you said they are. Last year, you didn't win. Like, believe in yourself. Like, I don't think much of this Navi team. And I think FaZe, whilst they haven't been spectacular here, honestly, they've lost games they should never have lost. They're at least showing me a little something in terms of Brokey's form. I think that we've seen a game or 2 now from Brokey. I'm like, okay, that's more like the Brokey I want to see. And sure, it's Apogee. He's given us a strong map against Apogee, but it's something. And I'm trying to pick between a team that I believe constantly makes it work after struggles, always comes back up and again, whereas Navi are just a team who are relatively young compared to the core of this FaZe roster, who have historically been able to return to the top time and time again. And I don't see it logically that having a Liege on this roster is the move that breaks them. And that this is the end. So I'm going to take a risk. I'm buying a much bigger dip than the Mongolz one, but at the same time, I am picking between. Well, it's nothing but dip. Like, we are. there's no cigars here. We're in Stockholm. It's all dip. Like, this is not great. And FaZe, I think, they have the pedigree. They have the players. Carrigan will make it work somehow. And let's just say, if your statistical anomaly maintains, I'll be very happy. But it is not the basis for my pick.
Yep. And they have a 50% win rate in Australia. Boom, easy. That's convincing. No, look, I think you're 100% on the money here. I mean, the choice to me would have been between FaZe and Navi as well. So I think it's a pretty straightforward one to kick out Falcons and VP there. I like the FaZe pick just because I feel like, have we really seen what this team was supposed to be yet? Like, when we looked at the roster changes that the teams were making around that time, when Vitality was, getting ROPS and FaZe was making their change and stuff like that, people were like, okay, ROPS to Vitality makes a lot of sense. But everyone, I think, was looking at FaZe and going, that change really looks like it should be quite a banger, actually, on paper as well. And I don't think it's quite hit just yet. Now, I guess the question remains, will it ever hit? If it hasn't hit now after, what has it been? Probably, 3 months or something like that at least. I still look at that roster on paper and think there's no way this can't work. Like, at some point, this is going to have to be good. And is it going to be now? Is it going to be at the major? Is it going to be in 6 months? Probably they don't get 6 months if the results don't pick up. But I just don't think that you can really keep this team out of the conversation, which is always the beauty of a team like FaZe, isn't it? For me, there's always going to be like a little bit of this X factor with a team like that there. So I still think Elige, we would hope to see a little bit more out of him. It's kind of crazy, like the numbers that he was putting up in his previous roster coming into FaZe, like they haven't really dropped dramatically speaking. Like, he's still putting up positive numbers in this FaZe roster for the most part, but I just don't think that they're hitting quite that same mark. So what's going on there? Is he just getting a little bit less resources in this team? Probably that's definitely some kind of a factor. But generally speaking, again, like I just keep going back to they can't not be good forever, this roster. So I think buying in the dip here is not a bad choice at all.
When they lose to Australis and they lose to Complexity, I no longer.
But they 2-0'd Rare Adam.
And Apogee today.
Oh, see?
Yeah, I mean,
numbers. Those are
that's
numbers.
hard. That's hard to beat. That Jacob guy, I mean.
I struggle with this squad because, right now, I mean, Brokey today had a very good game and, has kind of been hot and cold with FaZe for quite a while, but I think we've seen at some events he just goes cold and there's kind of like, guys, who else is supposed to be stepping up here? Like, was it Rops? Is it Frozen? Like, who's actually like a driving force on this team? And, in theory, it should be a Liege. I just watched this FaZe team, and I think iteration over iteration, how many chances are we going to give Karrigan? I feel like we give him so much breathing room as an in-game leader, as there's so much conversation because of his tenure and his reputation and what he's accomplished in the past. We just go, oh, his stars aren't showing up, and I just don't necessarily think that's true. I think the style is outdated, and I really do think, even though they've had decent T sides here at Bucharest, I just see a lack of that team cohesion, and I see a lack of like player interplay that I just think, is there enough happening in practice still? I think when Maui calls them the great procrastinators, for example, I do think that was true. I just don't even know if that they practice efficiently, which is strange, because I think, with the amount of reputation and, players and history that you've got on this team, you would think that all of that is down pat, but maybe they almost take that for granted. I don't really know necessarily what's happening behind the scenes, but when I see, players getting sucked into the FaZe void, and I think Tech Girl called Elysian energy vampire on the desk and wondered whether that was true. I almost think that this FaZe organization, or the culture that they've built up, might just be the vampire itself. Like, it just seems a bit dead inside, and it's always frustrating losses. But we're still frustrated. We're still losing, and I don't see any of that shift. I don't see the tactics increase. I don't see players stepping out of their shell. I just see the same thing, kind of event to event. It feels like.
Yeah, for me, the issue I had, because I know I've voiced this to you, I think on the last episode or even in between shows, that watching a Liege POVs just to try and figure out the differences, like why his numbers taken that big shift. On CT side, it did feel like straight up the resource gap is primarily what's the cause of the number gap. Like, he has the opportunity to play the same spots, but at the same time, it's not quite in the same way. Like, Complexity would explicitly set him up with multiple HEs to pop the outer smokes for himself on Nuke, and he'd get to play it at a range. He'd leave main entirely. He wouldn't be up close or have to be in specific rotate positions to do it. On this phase, he does kind of have to play more traditional as the way the meta is right now. Like, he's closer to main. He's not got all this extra util to pop smokes and challenge the way he wants to. Then on T side, it was just a nightmare. Just the way they were calling, the way they were playing, no one's playing off each other. They're making a lot of repetitive, uninspired calls that just didn't really, for me, scream of Karrigan. Like, it was just a bit off. So I do understand the frustration, and I've had the frustration as well. It's just a question of, I refuse to believe it won't work. And every time I've made that call in the past, it kind of has been validated. Like last year with Heroic, at one point, I just started saying, this roster will just work. And it did start working. Like, I've got the same sort of vibe here. It's like, you just can't have a Liege and not figure it out eventually. Like, he is that quality of a talent. They should make the rise again. I've got another pick to make, and now it gets ugly, because I've got to take an underdog.
That's true.
Just play La Marseillaise. I'm going to take 3D Max. National pride, but screw it. They are worthy of it. Especially with their Bucharest run, I think. They went straight 3-0, didn't they? It was outstanding. So fun to watch. And sure, they're 2-1 wins every time. But that's the thing with 3D Max. The reason they're a great underdog pick is that they will make every game close and scrappy, and they'll always believe in themselves to be, the bigger dog. Like, not in terms of the actual dog in the fight, but the fight in the dog. They believe they're the big one. They've got that scrap and they're ready for it. I'd love, basically, at this event, honestly, the unleashing in some ways. Like, it feels like it's been the best event for Gravity so far. Like, he's really had some great series, hit some amazing shots, just been Gravity in the way I hoped he could be. The idea of, like, a lot of us who've been fans of him have been like, oh, we've watched his POV and seen him hit these shots and seen him make these adjustments and be super explosive, but we're like, overall, not seeing him consistently do it. We're seeing him struggle to figure out when and where to make plays. This event, it feels like he's hit the nail on the head more often than not. And so I've been really excited to watch them play. It's been really fun. They still have, obviously, that sort of that complete buy-in to Maka. Like, if Maka was just a little bit shorter and wore, like, double-breasted coats with one hand in here, he would truly be, like, the physical manifestation of what he represents on the server. He would be Napoleon. But instead, he doesn't quite have the aesthetic. He just needs that big hat,
that from?
I'm gonna be honest. I thought he was going for like a Inspector Gadget or like
no.
or like Two Minutes in a Trench Coat or something.
If you know Napoleon, you know that Maka, front lines, always there, fighting and dying with his men. He is exactly what I need, and I'm just kind of having a little bit of a romantic moment with this team. So I'm going to pick as my underdog. Because, sorry, Liquid, you're not better than 3D Max right now, and the rest, nothing they have has that magic that 3D Max does right now.
Yeah, no, just to validate you, I did know where you were going with that Napoleon little bit. So even if Yumi didn't pick up on it, I think there was something there at least. It wasn't. I mean, look, it didn't land. It wasn't like a super 10 out of 10, but it was there. It was there. I like this pick as well from you. I think, again, this was probably the obvious choice as far as I'm concerned. Just across the board, generally speaking, a pretty good solid squad. Like, you're not really relying on anyone to like pop off in any certain way to say, oh, they're going to be able to get an upset or they're going to be able to do a deep run or anything like that just off of X or Y player having an absolutely nuts performance. And I think, generally speaking, they are that epitome of like an underdog team in that they go to like these tier 2 tournaments and they pick up wins or good results. They go to some tier 1 tournaments and like we've seen at Bucharest, they're able to get themselves a 3-0, which, like, to be fair, the teams that they played against in this 3-0 weren't exactly like insane standout names. It was Astralis, Aurora, and Mongolz. Mongolz, as we've highlighted, have had a bit of a dip or are having a bit of a dip. Astralis in a bit of an interesting up and down kind of a spot at times as well, and Aurora. Look, I guess with the Eternal Fire coming into that roster, it is a pretty decent scalp, but there's a bit of shenanigans going on there that who knows if they're 100% settled, if there's anything going on in their heads necessarily. Overall, though, I think you do have to give them quite a bit of credit for that run at Bucharest. So that is a big tick in my book in terms of a form indicator going into something like Melbourne, and I definitely think that they could be a team that causes quite a bit of a ruckus. As far as those teams down in the underdog category are concerned, they're easily one of the better picks. So I'll give some credit for them for sure.
Yeah, I think we've romanticized 3D Max a little bit, just in terms of we love teams that play different styles in general. Especially if it's like exciting or it's. They come up with cute ideas, and 3D Max are just kind of one of those teams. And now with them adding body, like, they just have not only like this belief in Maka, but then, there's also, if Maka's having a great game and doesn't want to focus on calling as much, like, body is actually genuinely a second voice. And I think they've been trying to balance that more and more since his integration, and he's still shooting really well. So yeah, I don't know. We've talked quite a lot about 3D Max in the past. I don't think I need to elaborate anymore as well. Good pick.
Yeah, we'll keep it simple. We'll not overindulge in this one. Jordan, we're back to you. You've now got underdogs only left, and, well, this is where it gets difficult.
Have I got 2 underdogs or 1? I've got 2, right?
You've got 2 left to pick, but you've only got 1 pick right now, so...
Okay. Oh, Jesus Christ. 2 of these... Oh, no. I'm in a bit of a spot of bother, aren't I? Maybe I should have gone for an underdog first. I don't know. I feel like everything I pick here, it just kind of feels like straight trolling a little bit. So I'm just going to go and throw my hat in the ring with Liquid. I'm going to say Liquid. And I know that sounds like absolute cap after what we've seen from them at Bucharest, but hopefully they've had a little bit more time by the time they get to Melbourne, where, you can integrate Shuhei into the mix here a little bit. Again, it's kind of the same conversation as what we're having almost with FaZe there, where it's like there's enough good pieces of the puzzle in this roster that you almost don't think that they can be that bad for that long. You know, I obviously hate them for getting rid of JKS. You know, let's just get that one out of the way, Australia Pride. But at the end of the day, like, I still think they should pretty comfortably be a decent enough team to like cause a bit of a ruckus here. And I think, again, by the time they get to IEM Melbourne, yeah, things have probably fallen into place there for them. And again, you've got players like Twists and Nerds that, realistically speaking, they can't go missing forever, right? So it's, again, it feels like a rough pick. In general, it's kind of like rough, all these teams that are left remaining as an underdog. But I think it's probably the best of the rest. That's kind of like where I'm at with this pick. So it's almost a hopium pick in a way, where I'm like, I can see the potential, or I can see where this team could potentially go. So that's what I'm banking on, rather than what we're getting at this exact current point in time. So we'll cross our fingers for the future, I guess.
Mark my words, this will be the event NAF is back to form. Ultimate will also have a great event, I think. I do believe that having the extra time will help them here. And I you know, NAF has been kind of a missing piece, and I think largely that was to do with you know, the Yakindar calling, and then the Twists, or then the Cadian calling, and then the Twist calling, and it's like he has no idea. I've said this before, but I don't think I saw NAF ever look as confused in rounds, like just watching his POV, as when, you know, going through those iterations and all those different calling styles. It felt like he was getting increasingly more out of the loop as to like what was happening in a round or how to read it, which is kind of not how I would characterize him just as a player. You know, I always felt like he had a very good understanding of how he was going to approach his moments. So yeah, I am expecting NAF to recover form, and Ultimate to recover form going into this event. I could very easily shit on Liquid and, you know, the weird things that they do with their VRS, and, you know, should they be considered Europe now, even though the invites have kind of gone, you know, there's a strange conversation that happens around this organization, but they're playing around the rule set, and I guess, yeah, great job. So yeah, I don't really have much to critique on that front. I still want, you know, individually, in terms of like the isolation of Nerds, to be a more considered option for them. I still miss the Nerds of old, of like entry into lurking, into, you know, do whatever he wants in the round. Like that was the Nerds I really enjoyed watching, and I just haven't seen that in quite some time now. So
no, yeah, the re-emergence of Nerds on Liquid will make them probably, I don't know, I mean, it's hard to stuff as many teams as we want to stuff into top 6 conversations, but that's realistically where you think they could end up, given the rest of the roster around him, like the rifle firepower they have beside him. Like, that'd be pretty insane. I just think there's only so many things a team can do, and there's only so many things every rifler can do. So if we want Nerds to be able to do kind of what the hell he wants, we have to kind of say, okay, NAF, you kind of have to play like a pack role sometimes, and it does change the identity of other players, I think, a little bit, and that's going to be the hardest thing to balance, is getting everything right. But that was always the case, right? Balancing all this rifle talent was kind of the art of making Liquid work with this iteration. So Shuhei, good luck. We all believe you are the player who could make it work, so can't wait to see it. But look, they could have figured it out by then. You're right when you said, Jordan, they need time. The most important thing for them is going to be that time before Melbourne.
I mean, the thing is, I guess the knock in the book is like, Melbourne isn't exactly going to be the priority for them, right? Yeah. That's going to still be like a stepping stone, where obviously they're going to be focusing on the major. So if they're not ready by Melbourne, and, you know, the results aren't there, it's probably like, okay, it's fine. We've really made this change to make it happen at the major. So let's not concern ourselves too much. Like we're saying, we're not expecting them to go super hard here at Melbourne. Obviously, there will still be the benefit of that extra time, you know, the next couple of weeks, basically, to kind of prep for Melbourne, and that will help in some regard, but it's not the end goal. It's not the ultimate goal, I guess, for them. So we can't really judge them based on their Melbourne result too hard, I don't think.
Yeah, but you also don't want these players having like a crisis of confidence when they get to the major. You know, if it's like, oh, well, they don't see the ramp up for Melbourne, they don't see the ramp up for Dallas, then you get to the Austin major where, you know, Liquid as an organization have shifted, have largely targeted the North American market. You know, everybody that's a North American org wants to do well in Austin. It makes sense. You know, Cloud9 got the dream run, you know, where they're kind of hoping someone else can take that torch in a respect.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But all right. Yumi, back to you for double pick. Like,
yeah.
2 for 1.
God, this feels weird to do, but I'm picking SAW. I'm picking
Yeah,
SAW
it's
as
hard,
my
isn't it?
underdog. They're a replacement team. I'm
Mm.
gonna be honest. I don't even remember who they replaced. But
Neither.
Fuck, I should probably know that off the top of my
yeah,
head. Eternal Fire, Aurora. Yeah, Eternal Fire.
right. Yes.
Ooh,
Okay.
yeah.
Mm.
But SAW kind of impressed me when they brought in Azu and Sejot. First off, that's how we say his name in the UK. Nobody wanted to say Azubu all the time, but they decided to make a big song and dance about it when they played at Pro League. And listen, Azu and Sejot both respectively have overperformed even my expectations. Like watching those guys on Endpoint, I didn't really see the allure when I saw the roster move, and I thought, hey, great opportunity for Azu, but Azu and Sejot, like they're not bringing over some like core system or something that translates well to SAW. Also, can Muterus, Story, and Agil get on the same page on playing international Counter-Strike? But to be honest, Muterus has called really well since the change, and I feel like he's almost made the most out of the pieces, and maybe it has simplified the game to a certain extent, maybe because of the language transition. But God, I mean, the team can really pack a punch when they hit the right bomb site or when they get into the stride in an execute in a way that I wasn't really expecting to see from SAW. So I just feel like they're kind of value right now because I feel like the players are playing much better than I would give them individual credit for if I put them on another team, for example.
The whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yes,
Look, I don't really have a
absolutely.
huge amount to say necessarily about SAW. I think this is one of those teams that, in my mind, again, as someone that's not paying a huge amount of attention to sort of tier 2, tier 3 EU kind of tournaments and stuff like that, I really only see them when they go to these bigger events. I feel like they had a nice little bump towards the back end of 2024, and maybe it's been a little bit of a slower start to 2025 for SAW. The ESL Challenger result is the one that kind of pops up in my mind, the Katowice Challenger that SAW
was
was
such
able to
an
win.
anomaly.
And there was some good teams at that event, so
Yeah.
that again is where you're going and looking, okay, well, if they can top that event, maybe they can do something special. But yeah, I don't really have too much to necessarily say about these guys apart from I think they're just one of those teams that's, again, a good upset team and potentially a good underdog pick. So I don't know if they would have been my pick necessarily, but I think it's not a bad shout.
I think they're one of the more interesting teams in that group down there because we haven't seen them since Pro League, like at all, it seems.
Yeah.
And look, they came out of the gates at Pro League with those 3 BO3 wins at the back of a strange, like, sort of firepower by committee type deal, and then the Sejot, like, explosion. You're like, what is this? Because we know if you're a tier 2 or tier 3, like, degenerate, I would say, like myself, like, you've watched Azuwu and Sejot on Endpoint be signed. Before that, you're like, oh, they're kind of talented. Now, they have moments on that roster where they really like, they're sparkling, like, they're brilliant. But then it kind of just faded, and that entire roster became very dull and lifeless. And you're like,
Just the husk. It was
like,
actually kind of tragic.
Is it because the core that's been here forever have just lost it? Or is it because these stars they've brought in, this latest batch, because they were so good at constantly replenishing their like star stock and just building off the back of it time and time again? Is it because they're not good enough? And I think Muter has shown, maybe Endpoint did just lose it. Like they were just, towards the end a bit, just down. It became a grind and they were no longer that same roster. Because man, they made it look so easy once they got those 2 in to just go, yeah, you can go to big events and show up and show other people off. Like, we've got these 2 new guys. We're now speaking a different language and it's working. So I think maybe they'll still have that sort of new factor where like no one's really sure how they're going to play, what they're going to look like. We've not got a lot of tape on them. And they could make an upset run happen here because there's a lot of weaker teams in the middle of the pack here for the picking. Like you could pick a few of these off if you're SAW. With good prep, good calling, and just a little kick or something from that young kid. Sejot has shown he can do it, so I do like it as a pick. It's just a bit of a question mark as to what they're looking like in terms of form and all that other stuff coming in.
I'm banking on the things I don't know rather than the things I do know about some of these underdogs, I guess. So, yeah, maybe a bit strange, even for me, but I don't know. They impressed, so yeah, I'm willing to put my faith in Muterus as a caller.
I approve of that. He's honestly, even sure when they were fully Portuguese, he was a strong caller. Like that's a guy who's undervalued as an IGL, especially now he's showing he can do it in English. I think some bigger teams should be calling.
God. Now I have to choose between these guys and the favorites, and I really. The worst part is
only one choice, right?
The worst part is I almost fell into old habits. But the first thing I wanted to do was pick. The first thing I wanted to do was pick VP. I was like, I mean, I pick him. They're the best, but I just don't know that I believe in this VP at the moment.
Dude, what I saw in that Rare Adam game, I would never pick VP ever.
Yeah, it's tragic. It's actually tragic. Like, first off, what have they done to my boy Flammers? I guess I'm gonna go with NAVI. I understand your problem with picking them, T. Like you said, you've been patient, maybe too patient with them at the start of this year.
Yeah.
I just don't believe that this team can be shit for an entire season. I don't think they're the type of team that will just not be willing to shift things up. Like I feel like they're one of the few that will make dramatic changes if they feel it's necessary to the way that they see the game, like just from a vision standpoint or individually what people are supposed to be doing. I've compared GamerLegion to NAVI in terms of the regiment style. I think that they can get whipped into shape in a different way that plays very differently. Like if I go into a game against NAVI on Mirage, I know Bit is going to be lurking Palace. Probably 7 out of the 10 times we play them on a T side.
Ima's under, like all this sort of thing. Like
yeah. There's so much like traditionalism to the way that they play, and it's very it's very well understood. It doesn't mean you can stop it necessarily, but it's very well understood by all the teams. I do just think they're the type that when they've had bad result after bad result in terms of their expectations, they will make dramatic changes, and I think they have the players to do it. As much as we will critique Wonderful for not being a superstar elite level AWPer to the degree that we look at others like Zywoo or Monacy or Shiro or effectively anybody in that top 8 conversation on the AWP, I feel like Wonderful is on the weaker side, but he is still as better than the people below him. As much as that may not always culminate in big games, he doesn't have the variance maybe to be a star at any given moment. But he's actually been the one piece in their decline that has been solid. It's mainly the Imma Bit JL core that I don't feel like ever is getting the impact anymore, but that can't maintain forever. Like usually one of them steps up into the limelight.
I mean, look, honestly, they've been in a place where they're losing a lot. They're losing a lot of rounds. He's playing with a rifle a lot, and he's just a really good rifler. I'm going to be honest. His AWPing, the style, the steadiness, it's been okay. He still, refuses to break out the box. But when he's got a rifle in his hands, he's just a good rifler. And that's all I can really say for him right now, is that Wonderful, in their trying times, has just been able to keep it together through his AK and through his M4. On which he is very strong. And I'm still going to fight with people about this. He's a better rifler than Torji, and so is Shiro. They're both better riflers than him. But Wonderful himself has been mostly keeping himself relevant, keeping himself active, involved through rifle play. The big question for me is, I don't really care so much about JL's form. JL for me is, I need a spark plug to win an event, break through, beat the best teams, just like magic when nothing else is working. That's what I need JL for. Imma and Bit are supposed to be the pieces in the system that consistently deliver and allow me to, win a bunch of events, time and time again. They're supposed to be the consistent factors. And they've looked incredibly weak. And Bit especially is concerning because I know he is mechanically amongst the elite. He just doesn't know when and where to do it. They haven't figured out something's going wrong with him. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but he's just not hitting his shots, not finding the same timings, the same space. It's all looking very uncoordinated for NAVI, which is something I don't historically see from them. I typically see them being very on point, perfectly executed, like a Swiss watch. There's just everything perfectly balanced and where it should be, and it all clicks. that aspect is missing. And then considering you can't rely on the form of anyone, you don't have any backup plan where you just go to. Just someone hit me a headshot. There's no one there who can typically deliver time and time again. So very worrying for Navi.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit, but then again, I guess the problem for Navi is that like the expectations are so high that you're expecting them to be a team that wins events and takes top twos and stuff like that. And so seeing them be third and fourth, it's like, oh, that's not that good. But it's like you still got top 4 at Cato, top 4 at Blast Bounty. Look, they didn't do too well at Pro League and Blast Spring, but I don't know. I mean, it's just there are other teams that are kind of on the rise at the moment. Someone has to fall as a result. I think it's kind of just the natural ebb and flow of the game. Is there enough missing maybe from this Navi team to say they're never going to get back to the top? I don't think so necessarily. Obviously, there's a lot of conversations happening around Wonderful and his form and Simple and this and that, and can you get a better AWPer and what have you. But at the end of the day, like I still think that team has enough juice in it if they all kind of click to kind of make something happen. So I think they're maybe like in that Mongolz pit if we're talking about dips. Maybe their dip's been a little bit longer and a little bit deeper, to be fair. But, you know, you still look at that roster and go, okay, that's a pretty good on-paper roster that I think could do something. It's just going to be a question of whether or not they can kind of recapture that. And will they do that for Melbourne? I have my doubts, honestly, and that's obviously why they're going to be one of these teams that comes in as one of the last few picks in our favorites category. It almost felt like they were just a default pick because you couldn't really be picking Falcons or VP at this point. So they were the best of the rest in the same way that some of the other picks down in the underdogs category have started to become as well. But there's enough there that you could think, okay, there's feasibly an argument to be made that they could make top 4 at this tournament if everything kind of gels together.
Yeah, listen, I risk saying something that someone else has said perhaps when I mention this, but Navi, team of the year at the end of last year, and coming into 2025, immediately humbled. They have maybe set those expectations about themselves because of the fact they win that award, and you know, even if they have tapering expectations towards the end of last year, it does seem as though they're going to have to readjust their mental or their focus. Because I see them getting frustrated, but I don't care about the frustrations. You're supposed to be a team that are like so well structured that even if someone's having a shit game, somebody else, you know, the system works, kind of akin to a GamerLegion. Like I almost feel like there was a complacency perhaps coming into 2025 that has to be readjusted.
Yeah, they do look like a team who went out in groups 5 times, rather than a team that made a final 7 times. An aspect that was quite sorely overlooked in the end-of-year awards, I thought, and, well, argued so, but it is what it is. Jordan, we have one last pick from you, an underdog to pick. So you get to now relegate me to the most disastrous final 3 picks possible. And I'm going to be honest, you could do it by picking literally anyone. I hate all of these teams as far as a pick, so go nuts.
Yeah, no, I think it's tough. I think I'm just going to go FlyQuest for the gag sort of thing.
Yeah.
I look, you know, you don't get the Australian on the podcast for the Australian event and then not talk about the Australian team. So here's my argument. Here's my justification for picking FlyQuest as an underdog. I think a lot of people are obviously going to have some preconceived notions about FlyQuest based on this previous roster. Obviously, the Dexter era, it didn't go super, super well for them at all. And, you know, they made this change. We haven't yet seen what they're going to look like with Nedic in the roster. I believe their first official is actually going to be the MRQ, which they'll be playing next week. So might change my tune after I see what happens at the MRQ, but I do think they'll get through that one pretty okay just based on an individual basis. When it comes to playing at an event like IEM Melbourne, obviously there's going to be kind of a higher level of expectation or pressure, I guess, on a team like this one. But I think to an extent there is going to be a bit of a honeymoon period with this roster. Nedic is obviously the kind of like up and comer or the next guy. I don't know how like in tune with the ANZ scene you guys are, but Nedic has very much been like that guy that's been in that conversation for a very long time. Maybe in the same way that a Vexite was. And I think, to be honest, he's probably been waiting in the wings longer than Vexite was prior to his addition to Greyhound at the time. So he seems like that natural choice to step up into the roster just in terms of who's available in ANZ if you were going towards ANZ, which based on my conversations with FlyQuest, they are trying to kind of maintain that ANZ core. They didn't want to necessarily push out into EU or NA in any way, shape or form beyond Regali. So that makes sense. I think Nedic's a great player as an individual. Obviously, he's kind of like a cut above a lot of the talent in ANZ. So he's again that sort of Inns-esque, Liaz-esque, Vexite-esque kind of figure that was just like, oh, he deserves to be on a better team and just hasn't been. There hasn't been a position in a team available to him prior to this. We've seen him a little bit overseas in Rooster, but it's apples to oranges when you're considering FlyQuest versus Rooster. So I think we should actually get a bit of a better level out of Netic on the international stage in this FlyQuest roster than what we would have seen from him in the Rooster team. I don't know necessarily how the roles are going to work because he's not going to be like a straight like role swap for Dexter out, Netic in. He's just going to fill those roles. And Netic's always been a bit of a weird player in the sense that he's played like some anchor roles, but he's also been in some like really important positions as well. So just where they shift all of that around, I don't know. And also, to be fair, I have sort of been looking at FlyQuest and they've been changing their roles as well. Like Inns has been in different spots all the time. And I think they're really still trying to kind of figure things out. Even in that Dexter era, they were just continually kind of cycling through, trying to find a bit of space. So I kind of like it from the sense that you're getting this up-and-comer, you're getting someone who's hungry to play the game. Hopefully he'll be a good sort of fit in this roster as well, because I had heard there was some... Yeah, like the vibes man was gone, Alistair, right? When Alistair left, the vibes weren't so great in that team. I think you could kind of see that as well. So I'm hoping he's going to be a bit of fresh life into this roster, someone that's like really hungry to kind of have this opportunity. We'll get this, honeymoon period with Netic coming in, and Inns maybe has a little bit less responsibility in terms of the firepower. Obviously, we've seen a little bit of a dip from him, so he can take maybe a bit of a step back, take some of that responsibility away from him when you've got Netic and Vexite, and I think Vexite's looking pretty good at the moment. So there's definitely some concerns, obviously, when it comes to FlyQuest, and I think you can definitely make an argument as to why this change wouldn't work. But my job in this instance is to make an argument for why they should be in my underdog pick. So I think there's a lot of good to be said about FlyQuest and this change and Netic coming into this roster. And even Inns going to IGL, he's now a couple of years older and more mature and in a different, headspace than where he was originally when he was in-game leading this team as Greyhound. So I think there's a lot that we can hope for. But that has kind of been the prevailing sentiment for FlyQuest, for Renegades, for Greyhound, for whatever they've been called at any given time for the better part of now 2 or 3 years. We've always looked at them and said, there's potential there, there's talent there, there's good players there. Can they realize that talent with Netic? Well, that'll be the next question mark. But I think definitely he deserves a step up, and I'm hoping that he's going to be able to do well in this FlyQuest team. And in turn, that they are going to have this honeymoon period over the next 2-3 months that will align with IEM Melbourne, so I can get my underdog pick right for this.
Yeah. I don't know who entries on this team right now. I think that's my main thing, because Dexter did so much of it, and he was a bit, feast or famine to a certain degree, and when he was in famine, the calling did look kind of bad. But I think in general, FlyQuest were in such a bad position, because Inns was mega slumping in the past few events, and even if Dexter's calling looked okay, and like his frags were okay, if you don't want to kick Inns, like considering the ceiling of how good he can be, it doesn't make any sense to do so. So when I did think they were going to make a roster move, I thought maybe, to be honest, it might have been Vexite or it might have been Liaz that they got rid of. I never expected Dexter. I never expected.
No, I don't
Inns.
think anyone did.
Yeah, it's kind of an absurd position to be in, because I feel like going back to the Inns calling is a regression in the FlyQuest or this core of players, sort of the trajectory they were on. And I think Dexter even said he didn't have time to practice effectively with the team, and it maybe reflected poorly on their results as a result of that. But to be honest, I think Netic kind of clears Vexite in terms of ability, if I'm being perfectly honest. Like, I feel like Vexite's had enough time to blossom into the fantastic flower and next emerging star rifler in Oceania, and he just hasn't ever really culminated that properly. So I actually see the ceiling of Netic firmer in place, even if traditionally he's not playing against the same level of competition, I guess.
It's hard to say, because obviously he's a little bit more untested on the international stage, and again, Vexite was that guy domestically speaking. Liaz was a star player in ANZ, guys. And obviously this is 10 years ago, but he was literally an absolute freak. He was winning 1v3s all the time. He was in a clutch. You'd just be like, hey, it's Liaz, he's going to win it. That's literally the kind of player that he was. And Netic was that kind of guy too. So you can have this significant drop off, obviously, when you move internationally, but I just look at that rifling core of Inns, Vexite, and Netic, and if we get Inns at even an average level as opposed to a slump level, I think you've got quite a lot of firepower there. On the Vexite topic, I actually think he's been a little bit better this year, personally. I think we've seen a bit of an uptick from him. So I think he's kind of gotten into that point where he's a little bit more of a solid force in this roster. He's not that carry guy. That was always going to be sort of your Ins or your Dexter, having that Dexter game, and maybe to a lesser extent Regali. He's kind of added a little bit more firepower in that AWPing role. But I just think in terms of firepower, this is probably the most maybe on paper firepower that we've seen from a FlyQuest roster in quite some time. And certainly since Ins was in-game leading last time, I think that's the one differentiating factor that we can look at in terms of how he's going to come into this calling position and how it potentially could go a little differently for him. Was the pieces that he was working with back in the day when he was calling for Greyhound was Sicko rifling and Alistair AWPing, and now he's instead of that got Nedic rifling and Regali AWPing, and I think we can all sort of say in both cases that's an upgrade. So Ins again with a couple of extra years under his belt as a player as well. In theory, that should be a little bit of a helping hand for him too. Plus, Vexite's a better player than he was back then when Ins was originally in-game leading. Maybe doesn't need as much assistance, maybe doesn't need as much micromanaging. Because as I had heard back in the day, he was someone that really kind of needed a bit of micromanaging. That was initially part of the problem for them, was that they kind of put him into positions where he, in theory, should have been able to kind of like manage himself, but then they kind of quickly realized, he's going to need a little bit of micromanaging. So then they shifted everything back up again, and he was getting microed. And now, we're a year and a half or 2 years later. Vexite's been in that team a little bit longer. So again, can he manage himself a little bit more? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how all of these positions are going to fall into place. There's a lot of kind of questions because we haven't actually yet seen this FlyQuest roster playing any officials. But just at least on top, in terms of on paper, I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. Are they going to be the next Mongolz? Probably not. But are they hopefully going to maintain or at least improve upon where the FlyQuest guys are sitting at the moment with the 26th position in a HLTV ranking? I would hope so. I think you'd want to see them sort of sitting inside the top 20. And they've had a pretty drastic decline in terms of the VRS rank lately. So that's, I think, going to be their first goal, is just trying to figure that out. And hopefully that starts with the MRQ, IEM Melbourne, and then this ACL tournament.
Yeah, hopefully so. For me, the big concern this year was, well, as I framed it, at one point it was just, Regali is the best rifler on the team, and that's a problem. You can't have that be the case. And bringing in Netic should alleviate that concern. I think I am fairly familiar with him. I do keep a good eye on, even internationally, like younger players, and seeing the numbers he puts up in local play. Obviously, he's always popping up when you're looking through pages. You're like, you can't avoid Netic just being there. Of course, when he came to the EU with Talon, nothing really that outstanding, and that was a big concern for me. I feel
I mean, Talon were definitely just like, hey, we want to make the major. Okay, it didn't work. I don't think it had the expectation that was going to be like a long-term project. I'm not sure though.
I'm kind of picking up what you're putting down. I'm kind of picking up what you're putting down because there was a lot of instances where Talon was playing in like some of these tier 2 EU.
Exactly. Yeah.
I like to call them Lala Bang Ding Dong Cups because they have all these random names. Kassad says banana cups. I call them Lala Bang Ding Dong Cups. The results were not great for Talon, I think it's fair to say, in a lot of those events. There was never really one where you looked at and went, wow, they actually did really well. And this was not even against like teams of the caliber that we're discussing for this particular tournament. This was like, academy teams and stuff like that. So, yeah, definitely a little bit of a red flag. But again, like I think in terms of his performance in the games that I got to watch of them playing in Talon, which was not a huge amount, and frankly, also not many of the ones where they were playing in Europe just because of the time zone. But at things like the RMR and some of the more local tournaments, I still think he was one of the better players in that roster. People are saying, MHL, this and that, but I still have obviously maybe a little bit of bias towards a player like Netic, but I think in a better team, which I think FlyQuest is a better team than Talon, hopefully he will slot in nicely and have a good sort of performance. And we can see, again, one of those players where we talk about potential turning into some actual translation into an international prospect. And yeah, it has to happen eventually, right? We're going to keep throwing these young players into FlyQuest or into these international projects, and someone's going to stick at some point, and maybe it's Netic.
I hope so, because for me, the very little that I got to see in Europe versus, for example, as you said, academies, Navi Junior was just him getting banged out by Crabini like time and time again, and I'm like, this is a bit concerning. But look, his numbers are absurd even by like Oceania farming type players, so hopefully it can translate into something a little stronger here, and we don't have to rely on Regali so much, is my observation.
I just think, again, in terms of players that have been picked up by international ANZ rosters or like FlyQuest-esque rosters in the past, was there any player that has had as much hype around them, domestically speaking, as Nedic has now in the recent history? I honestly don't think so. Like, probably the biggest one would have been Liaz when he got picked up by 100 Thieves. Everyone was like, Liaz is fucking sick, bro. Like, he was him at the time. And then, like, even Inns, when he came into Greyhound, you know, he probably flourished in Greyhound rather than domestically speaking. Dexter, maybe the same. Like Malta, Hats, Sicko, Dick Stacey, any of those names probably didn't have the same domestic hype around them in the same way that Nedic has. And Vexite also probably not quite as much. So I think he's like him. He's like the next him. Whether or not he will actually be him, we have to find out.
I think that's maybe where my comparison was before. It's like Vexite had a lot of generative hype about, you know, he's the next guy up, and he, you know, you see the potential, and, you know, he's such like a young talent in that respect. And he, with 2.5 years on the roster, I do agree with you. You know, he is improved significantly over that period, but it took him a while. You know, I think it's really in the last like 9 to 12 months that I've really seen that version of Vexite. So,
but Vexite also was much more unproven, by the way, when he got picked up he's younger. Vexite is younger than Nedic. He was 16 years old when he first started playing. There was tournaments he was not allowed to play in because he wasn't old enough. And then he played like 2 years in Order, and then straight away he was in Greyhound. So he like had the fast track, like way faster than almost anyone has ever had. So there is some discussion to be had there, I think.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, understandable.
Yeah, potential's there. We'll see if it delivers.
Yep.
Oh, I hate the position I'm in right now.
What, you wanted to pick FlyQuest?
I could have had a more interesting case for them than I have for 2 Brazilian teams I don't believe in, and a German team I also don't believe in.
Well, one of these Brazilian teams doesn't even technically have a 5. Like, I know that they played, but
they played with a stand-in academy kid, and the rumor is that Pain are getting DGT, I believe, is what I've been leaked. And if that happens, all of a sudden I have to pick them. But I don't have that information right now. I don't know if that's really going to come true, and I can't pick it on a hope and a prayer.
Sure you can. No. I literally did that with FlyQuest.
Well, you know who the players are. Like, I'm talking about literally it's my imagination having to fill in the blanks in terms of who's even going to be there, let alone how they'll play.
Sometimes you just have to believe, you know? Like, you've just got to believe in yourself. Or in this instance, believe in Pain.
Yeah, that's what Ted tried to do, to be fair.
Yeah,
and it didn't work.
It worked out for him.
EO3'd.
And then MIBR are just... Yeah, no, okay, I'm gonna believe Pain make the move happen, because I refuse to pick big, and I don't have the faith MIBR seem to give other people. Like, I've seen a couple of people pick MIBR on the show before, and I'm based on what is my problem, because I don't even have right now this great Insani to believe in. Like, there's nothing to really believe in on MIBR. But in Pain, I still have Big Uzira. As much as he may have had a rough event, and they did just get absolutely crushed in Bucharest, I still think that Davideus is a really solid rifler, and he actually had a couple strong maps scattered in this mess of an event. So I do think they are going to be better, and if they do show up with DGT, boom. Yeah, here comes the dynamite. Like, this team is all of a sudden back in conversations as like, oh yes, one of those frequent upset teams everyone's going to pick. Everyone's going to want to see them play. They're going to be really dangerous if they make that move happen in time. So I think Pain, the story's still the same. They have this great figurehead in Big Uzira, who's like the fragging IGL of the team, with one of the grossest POV like gun models I've ever witnessed. But hey, everyone has their problems.
He started a trend. Like, other players are doing it.
And like, it's still ugly. I don't care how many people do it. It's still ugly.
Yeah. I'm just saying, you know, it's kind of in vogue right now.
Yeah, but so was the mullet for like last year, and still hate that. So, you know, there's certain things I can never get aesthetically used to, and that's one of them. But they've got this young player in Snow who shows flashes, shows glimpses. I think there's a lot to like about Pain that's going to flourish, going to prosper in the coming year or so. I think last year was exciting, but not quite the right time, given the youth of certain players, the experience they had. If they bring in DGT and this roster gets to play this event with that guy, I think they got a chance to just be that explosive underdog run that you don't expect, you don't see coming, that all of a sudden, boom, just hits you in the face. So it's a big risk, it's a gamble. If they show up with Demo, the academy kid they're currently playing with, he's not been terrible, but they won't be anywhere near good enough to make it through. So hey, coin flip. If one player's there, I love it. Other one, I hate it. But it's better that than big or MIBR. So that's my case. There's not much to it, but it's mine.
No, I mean, I think fair enough. Like, you're kind of hard done by, really, with the remaining picks. It's what can you really say? I mean, again, you've kind of hit the nail on the head. Everything beyond probably the top 4 of the underdogs was really like a bit of a wild card pick, and I think that's really all I have to say on this one. There's just not that much to really say positively necessarily for any of these teams beyond, hey, they've been okay in the past. Could they be okay again? Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. Especially in this case when you're making roster changes.
I think if they do go with DGT though, I love the move so much. You know, I think that's the one thing that we've talked about before on the show with Pain is that I just feel like they don't have a secondary leader, like someone that can serve as like a spiritual, calming presence outside of Big Uzera. And I think that frustrates and has led to frustrations for Big Uzera. Like, I've seen that guy yell more at recent events than ever before, really. He used to have such a calm temperament. And I just don't think he has another person that won't lose his head and can keep everybody centered. And DGC maybe is a bit like more the chaotic neutral. He's like a lurking player that makes like very ambitious plays, but I think he almost needs like another person that can serve as like that kind of talisman, I guess, on the squad. And yeah, I feel like they also just get a very solid lurking player as well with it. So I would rate the move if it happens. So I could see the vision, but also you're going. This is more than hopium. This is like this is borderline Delulu if it doesn't end up happening. So
we are how far out from this event? Like it's 21st.
A week and a half, 2 weeks.
Yeah, we got
2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, 10, 11 days. It could happen.
Yeah.
It could happen. If it's not happened by then, sure, I will feel like a bit of a mug, but realistically, that just downgrades my pick to being as good as the rest of them that were available. So, yeah, not too much to lose.
I also thought about picking the Falcons, for example. You know, and that was
on
based
the same
on
basis.
Like, I was based on like,
are they going to get Modesty?
If Modesty goes, but I also projected in my head like he will play Dallas with G2 and then leave, so that he doesn't have to do the Astana thing.
Right.
Okay.
Or he might leave before Astana. It's one of those two. So.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, Falcons obviously not picked. Do we want to contribute any significant time to the teams we haven't picked? VP Falcons. We've got any takes on them that might, bring some interest.
I don't know. I think I've sort of said what I said about VP already. All I needed to see was that game against Rare Adam. Like, bro, if you're losing to Rare Adam, especially in that fashion, I don't have a lot of faith. I love Rare Adam. I love the players, but like they're just not a good team. Somebody's just doing the most random shit like you've ever seen. Like he's the wildest player probably playing in tier 1.5 to 2 Counter-Strike at the moment, I think.
Isn't that inspirational though?
I mean, but he's also like 50 years old, mate. Like, how is this guy getting away with this? I've seen him jump through a smoke onto the B site while a guy's planting with an SMG and like just get that kill and no one's even looking at him and stuff. I don't know what's going on I hate watching somebody. I love watching somebody, but I hate watching it. Like he's that guy that
it like doesn't make any sense.
When I'm watching an ECL game,
basically.
Like I'm watching Rare Adam be up like 10-4 or something, and then I just see somebody running through a smoke 4 rounds in a row, and now it's all of a sudden 10-8. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, bro? So if you're losing to that, then I'm sorry. Nothing positive necessarily to say about VP. I just think they're one of those teams they're just not that interesting to me. And they've kind of always been not that interesting to me. I don't know what it is. Even in previous iterations, like going all the way back to Outsiders, I just don't care for this team. I don't think they have aura. Maybe that's what it is. Like maybe I'm just an aura guy. And I'm like, I just don't have any interesting storyline to necessarily associate with VP. And so I see them have a bad result. I'm like, yeah, great. When it comes to Falcons, again, what can you really say beyond obviously what's happening with this whole Monacy news? They should be better than they are, I think, in my opinion. And I think inevitably at some point they will be a decent team. It's just going to take iteration after iteration after iteration before they eventually hit something good. But I think that Falcons is inevitable. That's kind of my take on this roster. They might not be there yet, but I think they are inevitable. And soon enough, they're going to be able to attract talent, not even just based on the fact that they've got the big paycheck, but they've also got good players there that people are going to want to play with. And at that point, that's going to be the tipping point where it's like, okay, everybody else is doomed.
It's actually absurd how tragically bad the Falcons are, considering how good the heroic core themselves actually looked towards the end of the year, and then, you know, like kind of ever since Nico as well, it's gotten worse somehow, even though like Nico is performing quite well and doing better. It just feels like, you know, Dexter is deteriorating and Tessis is also getting snapped out of existence. And you know, it turns out maybe they needed a bit extra, but you know, there's maybe a calling or maybe even a coaching problem in the Falcons. Who's
hot take,
you know, and not yeah, get him gone. He's a fraud.
Yeah, get him.
But I will say on the VP thing, oh, God, man, I wanted to be excited from the perspective of like, listen, if they're gonna kick my goat Jame, they better at least be good. Like, I better see Flip play better. I better see Fame play better. You know, when they add Flamus, he better be sick. And like, Flamus just isn't really getting. He's not really being set up in the way that Flamus has been. Like, he went from, oh wow, tailor-made rounds, and oh, we're gonna do this explosive thing, and now it's just like being fed to the wolves, and you know, Flit is still kind of baity, and Fame, to be honest, Fame has actually seen improvement. I actually can't knock Fame individually. Yeah. He does look a lot better, but I just lack that extra oomph. There's no tactical prowess here. It doesn't even seem like there's a lot of autonomy either. Like, they're still playing kind of cringe, and in a way that like I can't even see the way in which they win games on a consistent metric. I've lost the allure, you know. Like, I want to say like Fit Flame Flamus should be an unbelievable combo, but I just feel like right now it's Fame and, you know, sometimes Flit, but I don't really see that Flamus anymore, which is a shame.
Yeah, he's got that. He's still got it in him. You know, we see flashes of it. We see rounds. We see maps where he just does what he can do, like that sort of very sharp sort of opening impact that he has. But no, we can't really get anything consistent out of anyone.
But there's something about the way that GamerLegion play that like they're so they're what I call like a team that are good at capitalizing on tempo. You know, they play like very in tempo Counter-Strike, and if you know, sometimes when you miss a beat, it can be very hard to get back into the flow of how the round is going to play out and like find your timing. I just feel like VP never play in tempo, which is strange because like that's the one thing that I think experienced players do the best. And this team has a load of experience, you know, outside of maybe Icy, Flamus. Icy, I would say, does have experience by now, but at this level, I see them take off timings or off peaks that, you know, suddenly the fight feels more disadvantageous. You know, they're not reading the rotations right, and I think it's maybe been a problem for VP for a while now. But it feels even worse now under Electronic, which is it pulls me off them.
Yeah, a bit of a concerning sign for them. But no, we don't have high hopes for either Virtus.pro or Falcons at this event, unless Falcons somehow make that m0NESY move happen prior to Melbourne. I find that hard to believe. That timeline.
Don't think so. Yeah,
that timeline's probably not going to happen. But yeah, those are our picks. I think, no offense to Big and MIBR, I don't care. So play better.
Facts.
We might talk about you more. Until then, here's what it is. But all right, thank you, Elfishguy, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Some great picks, some interesting takes. And as always, yeah, if you enjoyed, leave a like, leave a comment to us your thoughts on our picks. Who picked who in the wrong place? Should I have done something differently? I'm sure I'll get the critiques. And yeah, sub for more. And remember that members get access to this video early, as well as other content and some other privileges. But okay, we'll see you next time. Goodbye.